Welcome to those of you who already joined. We will start the live Experts on Air session in 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, we start the live Expert on Air session. Okay, welcome everybody to this live Expert on Air session. On behalf of the Inter-American Development Bank, I wish you a warm welcome to this 5th and final Experts on Air session. My name is Menno Valkenburg. I am one of the experts in the IDB training program. Together with me is also Gentil Senat. Gentil is in the background. He is monitoring your live questions. This week we received a number of questions in both modules that were covered in this week. We have 2 modules that we look at this final week. One is the Human Resource Management Tool, or also called the RACI Matrix. And the second module, the final module, is the Project Control Tool, of which the Earned Value Management is one of the elements in that control tool. So it's great that you're here on this call. As I mentioned, you can put in your live questions now. We will first cover about 5 questions in module 8. Then we're going to cover another roughly 5 questions in the project control tool. And then after that, we have some time for some live questions. Let's go to the first question. The first question we actually took from the forum in the course, because there are also a couple of interesting questions. The question in the forum that you all had a look at is, why is it important to establish roles and responsibilities for the team? And I just wanted to give you a little bit of reflection on that. A lot of you, many of you responded to this question in the forum. There were some great answers to that question. I think if you look in projects, if you look in development projects, the people in the projects are critical. Without people, without knowledgeable people who can perform the activities, achieve the deliverables, without having those people, the project will not be successful. Now, in order to grow a team and establish a team, one of the first things you want to do is make clear to everybody on the team what is your role and what is your responsibility. So it's really important to establish that as part of your planning, so that people know what they do, what they shouldn't do. It helps the efficiency of the project. What you don't want is that 3 different people work on one and the same activity and not knowing it from each other. That will be a waste of time. So you can really improve your efficiency by making clear, okay, who works on what, and so that people also know that from each other, who's doing what. It will help productivity. It will help if you know as an individual what are the activities, the tasks, what are the deliverables that you're responsible for, and that helps you to become more productive in your work. It helps to boost the team morale and motivation. It helps to take ownership. If you assign deliverables, if people take ownership of certain deliverables in the project, it will really help the motivation of the people, the motivation of the team. So your team building really starts by clarifying what are the roles and responsibilities. And this is not just assigning it by the project manager. No, this is a mutual discussion. So you want to make sure that the people understand what is the role, what is the responsibility, that they feel somewhat comfortable in doing it, that they feel somewhat challenged, because it's nice to be challenged and to do something that maybe you don't do every day. But you want to make sure that people understand that, agree to that, and that helps them to stay motivated. So that, I think, was a nice question. It's very important to establish those roles and responsibilities, and that is a key element in this first module, the Human Resource Management Tool. Let's look at the second question. The second question also came from the discussion forum, and that is the question, why is it important for the team to be multidisciplinary? This is also a good question, and again, a lot of good answers came in. Typically what you see in projects is that there's not one person that can do everything. You typically need expertise from different disciplines. You need people from different disciplines. You also need people with different backgrounds and different attitudes that give a different spin to the project. So you need people who, from the content perspective, know different things from different disciplines, but also maybe from a process perspective. Maybe you have some people who are very good at risk management. Maybe you have some people who are very good at planning. Maybe you have people who are very good at communicating. And you need all these elements, all these disciplines into your project so that you can really tackle all the challenges, all the issues that you may face in both positive and negative ways. So When you establish your team, make sure you have people from different backgrounds, that they bring different things to the table, different disciplines, both content, both process-wise, and also probably in relationship-wise, and how they can develop themselves, how they can develop other people in the project team. So that's a couple of reasons why it's very important to have your team and to let your team be multidisciplinary. All right, let's go to the first question that came in throughout the week. The first question came in from Andrea. It's question number 3. It received 10 votes. Thank you, Andrea, for putting in this question. Her question is the RACI matrix only used at the level of work packages, or is it also beneficial to drill down further and develop a separate matrix for each work package looking at task and mitigation actions? Andrea, this is a very good question, and we get this question a lot, also in training courses and workshops that we facilitate. The question is always, do we do the RACI matrix for the whole project? Do we do it to every level of detail? And I think why the RACI matrix as a tool is so powerful, because you can actually apply it where you need to apply it. You can apply it further where you need to apply it further. Let me try to explain. So let's say you are trying to assign responsibilities at a deliverable level. And you realize that at that high level, it's not really clear who does what. So you go one level down. You go down to the work package level. At the work package level, it may be possible to assign a responsible person, the R, so a person who's doing the work. It may be possible to have a person approving the work, but maybe you realize that there's actually 2 or 3 people that need to approve. Now, one of the unwritten rules in the RACI matrix basically says you can only have one person approving a certain element. So that could be a reason to further break it down. It could be that you have a very important work package and that there are 3 people that need to approve different elements of that work package. So in that case, you probably want to break it down into those 3 different elements so that it becomes clear who approves what element of the deliverable or of the work package. Same with responsibilities. The R, the person who's doing the work, is a very important person also to know for the project manager, so that the project manager knows who does what. If the R is 5 or 6 different people at your work package level, there is a risk that nothing happens, because maybe everybody looks at each other and is assuming that the other is doing the work. Or another thing that could happen is that everybody is working on the same thing as part of that work package. Now, that could be another reason and another example where you want to break down into more detailed work packages or activities and really assign those activities to individual people. So basically what you can use the RACI matrix for is to clarify responsibilities. So whenever you try to assign responsibilities and you cannot really agree on who's responsible, who's accountable, who needs to be consulted, the C, who needs to be informed, if that is kind of vague, it might help to break it further down. It's the same basically with the work breakdown structure. The work breakdown structure you use to better clarify the scope of your work. And here you're actually using the same technique, but now to clarify who's responsible for what part of the work. So I hope this helped answer your question, Andrea. Thanks again for putting it in. Let's go to question number 4. Question number 4 came in from Del Reese in the Bahamas. It received 1 vote. Thank you, Del Reese, for this question. The question is, it is important to define and establish the roles and responsibilities of the team, but isn't it more valuable to cross-train all employees to be able to fulfill posts in the event that an employee is out sick or out of office for a reason? This is a very good point, Del Reese, a very good question. Thank you for bringing that up. I think in certain organizations and in certain projects, it could definitely be helpful to cross-train people and that people can take over from each other, especially if you have activities that are really critical to continue. However, you should probably also look at this as a risk. So if you, for a particular project, foresee that people may be out sick, or maybe out of office for a reason, or maybe unavailable unexpectedly, you could view this also as a risk, and you probably want to think about what mitigations can you do to mitigate that risk. I think anyhow, what you would like to have is clarity on who is responsible for which deliverable, because you want to create some ownership with the people that are responsible for the deliverable. So even if they're out sick, or even if they're out of the office, that they feel responsible to at least find somebody else, or help the project manager and help the project team find other people who can take over those activities. You don't want that responsibility to be solely with the project manager. So as a project manager and within a project team, you want to create a sense of responsibility. It may be needed to cross-train people to make sure that people can back up for each other and fulfill posts in the event that an employee is out. On the complete other side, I don't think you want to train everybody and cross-train everybody, because that would cost a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of investments, and at the end of the day, it may not always be necessary. So you want to find that balance as to, okay, who are you going to cross-train, to what extent, how much effort does that cost, versus what is really the risk of an employee being out sick or not available or out of the office for a certain reason. What we can do is, I have an additional slide here to look at the RACI Matrix, and I thought that was maybe good to reiterate. There were some questions also in the forum to clarify some of these fields. So I just wanted to do that in this way. By the way, if you have any live questions, for those of you who are live on the call, please make sure you put your live questions. So far, I don't think we have any live questions, so feel free to ask them. At the end of these questions that we have here, we have some 6 more to go. We will have some time to answer your live questions. So feel free to answer them below the screen. You can post your live questions. To go back to the table, this is the RACI table or an example of a RACI table that comes out of the PMA Learning Guide, page 94. And for example, it is clear here that each of these products or deliverables, the project plan, the collected requirements, preliminary design, tests, they all have one responsible person. So it's very clear that Benito is responsible to basically write the project plan. Ana will approve it, and Carlos and Eduardo need to be informed about the project plan. Carlos is responsible for 3 products or deliverables: the collected requirements, the preliminary design, and the tests. So if Carlos gets sick, then you definitely want to make sure you have some kind of backup. But as I mentioned, you also want Carlos to think a little bit about, okay, in case he's not available, who else could do that? Who else could take over that role? And just to clarify the C, because in the forum I saw a couple of people were wondering what that C means. The C, usually we say it stands for consulted. I like to phrase it as to be consulted. So for the preliminary design, who needs to be consulted? Who are you going to reach out to as maybe an expert or a person who has some valuable input into the preliminary design? And for that person, you would put the C. So Eduardo, in this case, is to be consulted for the preliminary design, and he's also to be consulted for the collected requirements. Okay, so I hope that answers this question a little bit. Let's go to question number 5. Sorry, we go to the next module now. We had 4 questions in its first module. Remember, you can still post your live questions. The screen where you're logged in to this live session, you can post your live questions, and Gentile is monitoring the live questions in the background. He will post them back here on the screen, and we will answer them after the second module of this week. And the second module of this week was the project control tool. First question received most votes this week, 24. The question came in from Del Reese, Bahamas, her second question this week. Thank you very much, Del Reese, for this question. Very, very good question. What happens when your budget, when your project has exceeded its budget and is behind schedule? Now, I think I faced this a lot myself, and I can imagine that you run into this situation as well. So I think it's a great question, Doris. Thank you very much for asking it. I think, first of all, you want to try and understand what is the cause of the exceeding of the budget and the being behind schedule. It could be that some unexpected major event happened, and that's why maybe you're behind schedule. It could be that there was a decision to modify the scope of the project. Maybe you were asked to include all kinds of things in the scope that cost more money and cost more time to work on. It could also be a case of bad planning. Maybe the plan was not that great. Maybe it was developed by people who didn't follow this course for development projects. After this course, you're all experts in planning, I'm sure. But maybe your project or the project you're into didn't have that opportunity to create a good plan. So it's really important to understand what is the cause, or what are the causes, and what is the root cause of why the project has exceeded budget or is behind schedule. And then very likely there needs to be some readjustment taking place. I think in the first live session, in the first week, we spoke a little bit about the triple constraint, the balance that you have between scope, time, and budget. And once you develop and approve the project charter, you have a balance between your scope, time, and budget. But over time, as the project progresses, the triple constraint can get out of balance. So it could be that more scope is added, but maybe you don't get more time, you don't get more budget. So that is where the project manager should be proactive, should reach out to the sponsor of the project and say, hey, I'm getting more scope, I'm getting requests to expand my scope. Can we get more budget? Can we get more time? So definitely, if your project has exceeded budget and is behind schedule, you definitely want to get in touch with your sponsor and discuss, okay, what is the best solution to go ahead? Are you gonna go ahead, try to find more budget? Do you get more time? Or are you gonna cut scope? I mean, that could be another option. The sponsor could say, no, we really have to finish by that date. There are some elements in the scope that are maybe less critical. So let's focus on those elements in the scope that are really critical to get by that date and within the budget that we have remaining. And that's then how you're going to realign and readjust your triple constraint. Okay, I think it's really quiet on the live questions side. So I'm going to invite you once more to put your live questions. If you really have an urgent question that hasn't been answered, maybe the course has answered all your questions. That could, of course, be the case, and that means that the course is really well. There were a couple of more questions in the forum. One was from question number 2, came in from Dora. Thank you, Dora, for this question. It received 4 votes. And I actually also saw this question coming up in one of the forums in the course. And there seemed to be some confusion, and even some people saying that the answers were not correct, and I don't know. So we had a thorough look at it, and it actually follows nice with Dora's question. She says, I would appreciate your taking the participants step by step through the practical exercise of Module 9, the Earned Value Management exercise. This was one of the exercises in week 5. And what I would like to do on the next slide, I basically have the formulas, and I'm going to take you step by step through the formulas and the information. So what is important to know, if you calculate earned value, it's important to know the date element. So at what particular date are you going to calculate your formulas? And in this practical example, we had 2 sets of data. One were values at the 6-month point, and one were values at the 12-month point. So the left table has the values at the 6 months. So let's say if this was a 12-month project, at 6 months, it would be halfway the project. At 12 months, it would be at the end of the project. So that is critical. That is, whenever you get an earned value question, it's critical at what date are we going to measure the values. And then we basically have 3 key values. We have the planned value, and these are basically the cost, the accumulated cost that you planned at the beginning of the project. So it looks like this project has a relatively linear flow of cost. So halfway the project, the cost is at 8 million. At the end of the project, it's at 12 million, basically twice as much. That's the planned value. The actual costs are the actual costs that you are incurring, the actual money that you're spending. And what you can see is at the 6-month point, you have spent 9 million. So after 6 months, you have spent 1 million more than you planned. Now, this may not necessarily be bad, and I'll come back to that in a second. At the 12-month point, your actual cost is 14 million. So it's actually less than you plan to spend. It's 2 million less than you plan to spend at the end of the project. And then the most difficult part comes, and that's the EV, the earned value. And the earned value is what you have physically achieved in your project. And it's basically the easiest, or I always find it the easiest, is to calculate it by using a percentage complete. And it's basically a percentage complete of the planned value. So in case of the 6 months value, we have the earned value of 7 million. So the earned value is actually less than the planned value, and it's also less than the actual cost. So it looks like that the percentage complete was less than expected. At the end of the project, after 12 months, the earned value was 17 million, which is more than the 16 million and more than the 14 million in actual cost. So that actually looks good, because it looks like you've actually completed a much higher percentage than that you planned to complete. Now there are 2 indicators that we calculate. One is the cost variance, and the other is the schedule variance, because the earned value technique allows you to get a sense how you're doing in terms of your budget, how you're doing in terms of your cost, as well as how you're doing in terms of your schedule. And basically, it tells you that if your cost variance or your schedule variance is negative, it typically means that you're behind. You're behind schedule, or you're trending over budget. So a negative variance is not good. It does not look good. Where a positive variance looks good. So what you can see is at the 6-month value, the cost variance, and the formula for that is earned value minus actual cost, is minus 2 million. So basically, after 6 months, you're trending over budget. It's a minus 2 million, so that signifies that you're trending over budget. Your schedule variance is also a minus 1 million. So it means you're trending behind schedule. At the end of the project, after 12 months, your cost variance is positive, 3 million, and your schedule variance is also positive, 1 million. So it looks like you were able to speed up and do better, and you actually ended up pretty good. And that's what we can also see in the CPI and SPI. CPI is the cost performance index. SPI is the schedule performance index. It's basically using the same values, but now rather than subtracting, we're dividing. So the cost performance indicator is earned value divided by actual cost, and the SPI is earned value divided by planned value. And what you can see is for the CPI and SPI, if the value is smaller than 1, that means it's not good. So you're, in terms of the cost performance index, you're trending over budget. For the schedule performance index, you're trending behind schedule. Where at the 12-month point, it is greater than 1, 1.21 for the CPI and 1.06 for the SPI. So actually, you ended up this project quite positive, under budget, which also clarifies by the actual cost, which is 14 million, and your budget was 16 million. So you're ending under budget. And you're also ahead of schedule because you have achieved your 16 million of planned value. You already achieved that, and you even achieved more. So that is why the SPI is bigger than 1. Okay, so I hope this clarified a little bit. There was some confusion whether the correct answer was available for the questions. Well, as you can see here are all the answers. So you may want to recheck the answers, but they're definitely there. And if you selected those, then you definitely get the correct answer. I think we have received 1 live question, so that's great. So let me quickly continue to the next question and still invite you to put in your live questions. We still have time to take some live questions. Let's go to question number 3. We're in the project control tool module. Question number 3 received 1 vote. And it actually refers to the learning guide. So that is great. On page 112 in the learning guide, there's also an example with earned value. And the question is, let's say the actual date, 3 months. This is, I think it's a 10 months project. And there are 10 schools delivered in 10 months, basically 1 school per month. So let's say after 3 months, there are 2 schools delivered, and 1 is 50% complete. Now, after 3 months, I think 1 school is $100,000. So after 3 months, 3 schools, the planned value would be 300,000, which is it's also there. So that's correct. The earned value, it says, is 200,000. And that is because in the example that is used here in page 112, they actually say there are 2 schools completely delivered. So 2 schools, 1 school, the value of 1 school is 100,000. So if 2 schools have been delivered, that value is 200,000. So the earned value would be 200,000. But then the example also says that the actual cost were actually 250. So an extra 50K. Now the question that this participant has is that whether that 50K corresponds to half of the school. If you read the example on page 112, I think it just says that 2 schools are delivered, and after 3 months, and it doesn't really say whether half a school was delivered. So yes, it could be, or no, it could not be. So the earned value, if just 2 schools were delivered, then the earned value would be 200K. If 2.5 schools were delivered, if after 3 months you physically check the status of the schools and you conclude that actually half a school has been delivered, then the earned value is 250,000, because you would calculate that half school. And then that would make sense because you also spent 250,000. So then your actual cost is actually aligned with your earned value, and then at least cost-wise, you're on budget. you're still behind schedule because you plan to have 3 schools delivered for 300K and you only have 2.5 schools delivered. So you're still, your SPI and your schedule variance still are negative or smaller than 1. But if the half school is indeed there, and then you should include that in the earned value as well. So I hope that explained that question. Earned value is kind of tricky. It took me quite a while to get my head around. So don't worry if you don't immediately get it. Just use some other examples and go for it. Okay, I think we have a second live question in, so that's great. If you want to put in more questions, we still have time to take some more. We have 2 more questions here, and then we go to the live question. Question number 4 is a question: what advice would you give for taking corrective measures on short-term projects, less than 12 months, especially when the earned value measurements show needs for corrective measures? This is a very nice question. This really depends on the type of project you're dealing with and the situation you're in. You definitely want to look at and understand, how does your triple constraint look like? What does your time, scope, and cost look like? It could be that you can speed up your schedule. There are 2 scheduling techniques that are also mentioned in the PMA guide. One is crashing the schedule, and the other one is fast tracking. So it could be that in your original plan, you had certain activities scheduled sequentially, but you actually realize that you can execute them in parallel, and that is what we call fast tracking. So we're basically doing certain activities that were originally scheduled to be performed sequentially after each other. We're now going to do them at the same time, which will likely incur some risk. Maybe you also need to add some resources, so it usually has some kind of impact, or you still have to look at that. Crashing the schedule basically means that you're going to put more people on the project to get it done. So it could be that you have a project where you need to take a corrective measure because you're running behind schedule, and by putting on 2 more resources on certain activities on the critical path, you can actually speed up the work. So what is really important is to understand the project. On a case-by-case basis, different measures could be needed, but you definitely want to make sure that you understand your triple constraint, your time, cost, and scope. And depending on what makes sense, and also what the sponsor agrees to, that will determine your corrective measures. Okay, let's go to question number 5. Question number 5 is the last question that came in during the week. And after this question, we go to the live questions. I think we still have 2 questions in, so there's still time for more questions if you would like to. Question number 5 came in from Nadia, and she asked whether there are other tools to monitor and control a development project. It's a very nice question. Thank you, Nadia, for that question. As we see in this course, we saw a couple of tools that are typically used in monitoring and controlling a development project. One is in the first week, when you looked at the project charter, you also looked at the results matrix. The results matrix is typically a tool that is also used by the donor to monitor and control the development project. So usually this matrix indicates which outputs need to be achieved in which year, and this will help you to monitor at a high level the project. Another tool which we saw in the second week is the S-curve. Sorry, the third week, the S-curve. The cost, how the costs develop over time. So the S-curve is typically another tool that you can use to monitor and control your project. And of course, the project control tool, the earned value and actual cost monitoring, is further building on the S-curve, and that really helps you to get a good understanding how you're doing in terms of your cost, in terms of your budget, and how you're doing in terms of your schedule. One of the other participants in this question also mentioned some quality and whether there are any specific quality control elements. And I really like that suggestion. And I actually have on the next slide, I have a picture from the PMBOK guide, the Project Management Body of Knowledge, the 5th edition. On page 239, there is a graphical representation of the 7 basic quality tools. And these are basically 7 tools that from a quality perspective, you would look into, or you could look into, in terms of monitoring and controlling your project. So one of them is the cause and effect diagram, also called the Ishikawa diagram. It was developed by a Japanese professor, or fishbone diagram. It looks a little bit like a fishbone. That is one of the quality control techniques that you can use in your project to monitor and control your project. And it can also be used to do some further analysis when you run into issues or problems, when you want to find the root cause of certain problems. So that is a great tool that you can really use also in your development projects. Another tool that you could potentially use is the flowcharts. By creating a flowchart of how things work, that could help you to understand the quality and help you to monitor and control your project. Other tools include check sheets, Pareto diagram, also sometimes called the 2080 rule, histograms, control charts, and scatter diagrams. Those are more specific tools that are used in specific control and quality control situations. But we just wanted to give you a flavor of, from a quality perspective, what some of the tools are that you can consider also in your development project, apart from the earned value management technique and variance analysis and certain other analyses. Okay, let's go from here then to the live questions. I think we have 2 or 3 live questions, so let's see what we have. The first live question came in from Doreen. Thank you very much, Doreen. Can you explain, please, when the budget is planned each year according to budget planning during the whole time of the project? How does this work? You have to plan the execution of the project according with what budget during the year. What happens if the budget is not executed as planned? This is the case that the administrator of the whole budget earns interests. Okay, this is a very good question, Doreen, and at the same time, it's very difficult for me to give you one answer to this, because the budget and the way projects are budgeted and organizations are budgeting projects differ a lot. So let me share you some experiences that I have from IDB funded projects. Typically, IDB funded projects link to the executing agency budget or the government budget that in the country in which the project is executed. So to some extent, what you want to do is you want to follow sort of the budget cycle and the budget planning that you have in the country or that you have in your organization. And you want to make sure that the planning and the budgeting of your project aligns with the budgeting and planning that you have in the organization. I think what you anyhow want to do is, I think in any development project, you establish a multi-annual budget. So typically, maybe a development project takes 4 or 5 years. So you have, for those 4 or 5 years, you have budgets, and the total adds up to the total budget for the project. And then in the current year, so let's say the year of execution, you go to monthly budgets. And also what you see in your annual operating plan that you need to prepare for all of these projects. So at the start of a new year, or in fact at the end of the prior year, let's say in November, December, you need to present your annual operating plan for the following year. And that plan includes the scope that you're planning to implement. It includes the timeline, the schedule, when you're going to do certain activities, and it includes your budget by month of what you're planning to spend throughout the year. Now that needs to be linked and tied to the budget, and at least on a monthly basis, the financial administrator of the project wants to track and monitor the actual costs and compare it to the budget. And at least in IDB funded projects, you need to, on a semi-annual basis, you need to present a report on the project, including a financial report, and give an updated financial projection for the remainder of the project. So I hope this answers your question a little bit. As I said, it's a great question. I would love to follow up on this in more specific if you have a specific project, but we should probably do that then offline. You're definitely free to feel free to get in touch with us on this. But I hope at least to give you a little bit of a perspective on this. Okay, we have a couple of minutes more to go, and I think we have two more live questions. So let's see if I can answer those. The second live question came in from Nani. Nani is interested in our insight about communication with stakeholders and the data gathered from earned value analysis. What should we be sharing with whom? That's a great question. Yes, earned value management is a great tool to understand the performance of the project. And those tools can be great communication tools. So I would definitely encourage to share this information. I think it depends on the organization that you're in. I know for IDB projects, twice a year, a PMR is prepared, a project monitoring report. And this project monitoring report contains different information on the progress of the project. I think it depends on the organization and on your project team whether you want to share the earned value analysis with everybody. The challenge is always a little bit that it's kind of hard to understand. So if you just throw out a number, our SPI is 1.08. Probably a lot of stakeholders will have no clue what that means. So if you communicate your earned value data, your earned value analysis, I would definitely recommend to explain a little bit what it means. And probably if you're behind schedule or over budget or under budget, what measures are you taking to catch up? So it depends a little bit on the situation. But it can be very powerful, and it can really show that you're proactively managing your project and sitting on top of things. So I would definitely recommend to use it if at all possible. Okay, let's go to the last question. Question number 3 came in from Ain. I thought you could only add the completed item, not a half item. Reference question 3 on earned value in the presentation. Great question, great question. Yes, that's actually a good point. I used the example where I said, okay, the half of the school is built, and let's use that in the earned value. That is something you have to agree upfront, actually, when you do your planning. So you in some projects or for some deliverables, you just say, no, it's either 0 or it's 100%. And nothing in between. However, in many construction projects, what I see is that there is an external supervisor who is supervising the construction, and typically what they do is they measure the progress completion. And even the invoicing of the contractor is linked to that progress. So if you have 10% completed, then you can send an invoice for 10%. So then it really goes into the percentage. But it could definitely be that you have a situation where you cannot do half the item. And so it's a good question. Thank you very much for bringing that in. Okay, with that, we are going to conclude this series of Experts on Air sessions. It was a real pleasure to do this. In a couple of seconds, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Gentile to say some words. I have a few final remarks that I want to ask you. One is, if you could please complete the course satisfaction survey. At the end of the 5 weeks, at the end of each week, you had an opportunity to fill out a survey. If you haven't done that, please do that. And then there's one satisfaction survey for the whole course. If you have any recommendations, feedback that you want to give us, please put that in the course satisfaction survey. You will also see a small video, which is an invitation from PMI, the Project Management Institute. It would be great if you can also become part of the family. Your certificate you will have to download from your dashboard, but it will take a couple of days before the certificate is there. So after you've completed the course, IDBx needs some time to process all the information, and then they will put the certificate in your dashboard. So you have to, you won't get an email with the certificate. You will have to download your certificate yourself. The IDBx team will send an email with a notification once the certificates are there, but you would still yourself would need to go to your dashboard to download the certificate. So that was it on behalf of me. I would like to thank you very much. Gentile probably has some information on some upcoming courses. Let me hand over to Gentile. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Menno. Thank you very much. I have to tell everyone that the first person that I would like to thank is Menno. Menno is my colleague, and he was here to back me up during the preparation work for the course. I learned a lot from him. He's really good, and it was a pleasure for me to work with him. I would like to thank as well IDB. The IDB office in Washington, D.C., but also the IDB office in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. And then last but not least, I would like to thank all of you, the participants. You were more than 10,000 people attending this class. It was definitely a success, and us as experts on air, we learned a lot from you as well, by your questions, by your insightful questions. You will know about the next courses and the dates about the next courses through announcements that will be coming soon. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure, and hopefully see you next time.
Great, and thank you very much, Gentile. It was a pleasure working with you. I also learned a lot from you. And I think on the final slide, we have the link to the website where you can find information on other IDBx courses. So we hope to see you in a new course, and Gentile and I are very happy to be part of this great event. Thank you very much.
Thank you.